My guest in the Nimataion today is Arden Leigh, and together we're spinning a yarn. Arden, it's great to have you here. You're the creator of the Repatterning project and frontwoman of Arden and the Wolves, and also a storyteller. So it's obvious what my question will be. What has been your favorite childhood story?
Excellent. Well, thank you for inviting me, first of all. And like I said, I got a chance to watch a few of these videos, and it's such a fun series. So I'm very grateful to participate. One of my favorite stories growing up was I had a book, a children's book, like one of those large, with the big hardcover. And it was Tales from the Arabian Nights. And my favorite one was Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you first approached me about the series, you were speaking about how there was, for many occultists, there is a story that we grew up with that, especially in a lot of fairy tales, like utilizes magic and witchcraft. And my favorite fairy tale growing up, for me, ended up being a bit of a cautionary tale, to be honest. But I think it's a great example of how the stories that we gravitate to end up showing up in our lives in real ways. And so I was fascinated by the archetype of the crafty slave girl. I was fascinated by this character that appears throughout a lot of folklore and mythology, but especially in the Arabian Nights. And in Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, you have this character named Marjana, or in the English translation, she was called like Morgiana, and she was the household slave girl of Ali Baba, and she's the one who figures out that the thieves were basically, infiltrating. Ali Baba has the cave that he goes to where he gets all the treasure, and the thieves are following him, and so they want to come and attack him and rob him at his house, and they're hiding out in the oil drums. And Marjana is the one who figures out, Ali Baba and his son and his family and everyone, they're just like, oh, come on in, like everything's great. And Marjana's like, no, there's something up with this. And she knows that either they don't heed her warnings, or she kind of knows that they're not going to listen to her because she has a lowly place in the household. So overnight, she goes and fills up these oil drums with, this hot burning oil. And she's like, oh, hey, I filled up your oil drums, since you're our guests. Like, we wanted to be hospitable. And of course, that's where all of the thieves were hiding. So of course, she murdered all the thieves. And she was able to do that without showing any lack of hospitality to the guests. Like, she did it under the guise of hospitality. And then in the end, she's also the one who murders like the robber baron, like the main thief, who then says, oh my gosh, you killed my 40 thieves, so now I have to come to your house, and now I really have to take my vengeance. And once again, no one in Ali Baba and no one in his family like recognizes that. And so Marjana decides at the end of dinner, she's like, how about I entertain you all with a dance? And they're like, yeah, excellent, dance for us. And so she dances, and she's dancing this like beautiful hypnotic dance with all these veils and everything. And at the end, she starts dancing with like a sword or a dagger, which is typical, I think, of a lot of those cultural dances. And at the end, she stabs the robber baron. And Ali Baba's like, oh no, what have you done? How could you do this to our guests? And she's like, you dumbass, this guy was trying to kill you. And so in the end, Ali Baba's like, oh my gosh, you were so loyal to us, and you saved us from our whole family being murdered. So therefore, now you are no longer a slave girl. I am going to marry you to my son, and you're one of the family now. And it turns out that in the real world, that kind of labor um is not always inherently rewarded.
So you're talking from experience.
I am. So here I was, as a kid, and I even as a child, it's almost weird and kind of awkward to look back at how deeply I gravitated toward like dominant submissive power dynamics. And so sure enough, I grew up, and in my late teens, early 20s, I guess more early 20s actually, I ended up in the BDSM scene. And I identified as a submissive. And at the time I was like, oh, this speaks to my heart, because this speaks to all these stories that I grew up with, and wanting to serve and submit, wanting to, looking back, I think there was a drive in me to receive protection and caretaking
Mhm.
by offering my service. And growing up with these stories, I kind of felt like, well, if if you're the one who's always taking care of everyone, if you save the day, then like surely you will be valued, you will be brought into the family, you will be, although even then I remember being like, I remember feeling like there must be some sort of a romantic or sexual component to that master slave relationship, because I was always confused. I was like, why does Alibaba marry her to his son? Like, if
Mhm.
she's his slave, like, wouldn't that, so I don't know how I knew that or gravitated toward it or whatever. But so there I am, and I'm in this dominant submissive relationship, and I was in my 20s, and I ended up working as a professional dominatrix at a house in New York City, where you could go and book sessions, and you could session with your favorite dom, right? But meanwhile, while I was a professional dominatrix in real life, I was the um the submissive and girlfriend and employee of my boss slash boyfriend slash dominant, who owned the house where I worked. And a few years in, New York City started, it was the era of stop and frisk, and we had a crisis with our governor being caught with sex workers and whatnot. So the city put together a vice squad and was like, we're going to shut all these places down. And even though at a house of professional domination, we were not engaging in sexual intercourse with our clients, but basically the NYPD was like, we think that like it's close enough that we have a case, so we're going to come in and shut the whole place down, confiscate all the funds, etc. So they arrest my boyfriend in front of me, and they lead him off to jail, and sure enough, and all the money is gone because they've seized everything. All the money is gone except the money that I had been saving over like 3+ years of this career. So it ended up being me who paid his legal fees and basically kept him from what would have been like a 7 to 10 year jail sentence.
Oh.
Yep. But it turns out that this is not all, like, this is sort of what inspired my own creation of the repatterning project,
Mhm.
because what I recognized was that there was a faulty belief or a faulty pattern within me, perhaps even from growing up with these stories, where working on behalf of the people who, that loyalty and that cleverness that she showed, and the ability to save the asses of everyone around her who weren't smart enough to pick up on what was actually going on. It turns out that depending on the person you are in service to, that isn't always valued in the way that you would think that it would be. So I ended up moving my boyfriend in with me at the time, and the relationship turned, it was already toxic, and it turned, by that time it turned flat out abusive. And so I basically, I was thankfully thankfully toward the end of that, I was smart enough, like within about a year's time, to kind of kick him out and be like, this is ridiculous. I'm not getting anything in return for the labor that I'm putting in.
Hmm.
And so,
Were you
kind
aware
of,
of the story that you were living? Were you aware of the master slave dynamic in the Arabian Nights? So
absolutely.
okay, interesting.
Yep.
So you
Very
really
consciously aware.
changed the story consciously. Oh.
No, I think it didn't change it for me. I think
Mhm.
there was still a real, I think there's still a real deep affinity that I have for it, but it made me realize that if you're going to be loyal to someone, you need to be selective about who you choose.
Mm.
And you need to make sure that if you have some expectation that your service and your loyalty and the things that you do for a person, and the way that you do, like, look out for what's going on, and you notice and you observe all these things, and you're able to take action before they can even, like, do you remember that movie, Gosford Park? Have you
Hmm.
seen that one?
Yes.
And do you remember how in the very end, like she says, what is the perfect servant? Like, what is the gift of the perfect servant? And that gift is anticipation.
Mhm.
Before they're tired, the bed is already turned down. I know when they're going to be hungry before they're even hungry. As soon as they're hungry, food is on the table, right? It's that gift of anticipation. And I realized and again, this is what caused me to be inspired to ultimately create the repatterning project. I had a faulty belief that providing that value inherently meant that I would be valued and I would be treasured and that I would be, protected as a resource. And the truth is just not true at all. There are people who you could give them a winning lottery ticket and they'll just blow it all in the next week or whatever. You could give them a gift of extraordinary value. And if they don't recognize that, they could just throw it in the trash. So that invited me to confront my own sort of faulty internal algorithm and realize that if I'm going to do something for someone, that needs to be a sustainable relationship. And I need to also communicate my needs if I expect to be taken care of or protected or valued in any way. And if I'm not having that, I'm not actually a slave girl, I can actually leave.
So it's fantastic, but it's a cautionary tale, as you said. It's tragic, but it turns out that maybe you found the treasure by creating the repatterning project.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's a cautionary tale, but I think what's interesting about that is that it really showed me how much the stories that we gravitate to end up showing up in our own lives.
Mm.
And then we have that choice, right? And so we can then change the archetype that we belong to. I ended up, when I created up my course, Myths and Magic, which teaches essentially how to harness that power of storytelling and narrative and character and archetype, that actually came out of a working that I did for myself, where I started to improve my relationships purposefully by working with the archetype of the beloved, who is loved for like no other reason than she just is. And she just is this gift with her mere presence. Because I kind of had to counter the way that the
Mhm.
crafty slave girl archetype had for so many years encouraged me to keep like giving value and giving value. And I'm like, I overlearned that. I need to pull that back.
Yeah,
So I think
you
even
don't
though it was a
have to earn it.
cautionary,
You just uh, are entitled to it. I mean, entitled is a bad word, maybe, but it's uh,
you just receive because it just
yes,
is, right?
yes, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was a great lesson for me,
Mhm.
honestly. I and that even that was not the end of my journey with that archetype either, with the slave girl archetype. I actually went on in the years after that relationship ended. I went on to date the creator of a TV show called Dollhouse. I don't know if you've ever seen Dollhouse.
Dollhouse, it's amazing. The ending is I was blown away. It touched so much in me. I cried at the ending. It's
Yeah, it
wonderful.
moved me a lot too.
Yes.
It did. Unfortunately, that person also did not take care of his dolls in the same, like much like the show kind of shows, the
Mhm.
you could be a perfectly good doll, but you could get put in the attic if it's
Yeah.
no longer convenient to have you around. So
Okay.
it was actually after that I really realized that was when I really made that conscious and did all that repatterning work. But I
Mhm.
think it's amazing just how those stories and archetypes follow us and inform our lives. So now that I know that, I'm much more intentional about what I choose.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about Grant Morrison's latest novel, Luda. Have you read it?
I have, yeah, yeah, of course, of
Because
course. It's
one of the threats is the panto being Alibaba. They play Alibaba on stage,
right.
and
Yep.
of course, it's his own way of hyper-sigilizing things, and so we both instantly get this sort of yeah narrative magic, as you call it.
Yeah, yeah. I actually read it, and I said to Grant, because I'm Grant's apprentice. I'm in a spiritual mentorship, basically Grant will send me curriculum to engage with, and I'll do the exercises or read the books or whatever, and I'll report back to them on my findings. And ultimately, we hope after, you know, many years to be able to publish that in sort of an epistolary form. And
Wonderful.
I spoke to Grant, and I said, I'm a little concerned about the way that you wrote your apprentice into the story. Like, I hope we've set up protection so that doesn't end up happening. I don't want to. But it's pretty funny though, because well, I don't want to give too much away in case there is anyone who has not read Luda out there. But Luda is also in many ways a survivor of ritualized programming to you know, to change her personality.
Mm.
And I was as well in that BDSM relationship. There were elements of hypnosis and NLP used to make me more submissive, you know. So there are many parallels there, but hopefully I'm not planning on ending up like Luda did. So
I find it fascinating how also Alibaba shows up in this novel. So the stories they emerge in a way that it's beyond our grasp, but we can see some patterns. And yeah, what you do with the
absolutely.
repatterning project is using this magic. It's
Yeah, primarily in the myths and magic course, we talk about the way that storytelling and archetype really influence us. And repatterning, it's more about like changing our individual beliefs and the internal algorithms that
okay.
get sort of
Okay.
stored in our body. But it's almost just like two sides of the same coin.
Mm.
It's like one is very right brain, one is like very left brain, but they both really point to the same kind of mechanics.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Arden, it has been such a joy to talk with you, and it's empowering to hear how you changed your story and um, found a way to help others change their story. So if you're interested, your links are in the show notes, and I'm looking forward to talk with you again.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much again for having me on. This was a fun chat to have.
Thank you. The world is magical.